As we take the time to mourn the death of Representative John Lewis, we are reminded of his ideology of good trouble and what that means. It's been a while since I made a video, and that has been in large part due to the things that I'm trying to do in my community to make positive change for the generations to come. But that should not be an excuse for me to try and use every outlet that I have available to me to make positive change and to get in that good trouble. So this is an attempt to get back on track and do what I know is right, and hopefully what you all see is right, in our effort to make the world just a little bit better for ourselves and for our children. Normally when I make a video, I try to take the time to confront a particular issue, but today I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story about what happened to me just earlier in the week. I was at an event where I was protesting the Confederate monument that is at the Williamson County Courthouse. Running alongside of that event, independent, but at the very same courthouse, was a prayer, a community prayer that I went to. I took some time from protesting the statue to go to the community prayer. While I was at the prayer, there was a gentleman who was no more than about 15 feet away from me during the time of the prayer. And just based on what he had on, I had a funny feeling that we were going to have a conversation a little bit later on at the protest site. And we did. He stopped by and he wanted to talk to me about the protest, and he actually asked if we had a petition to counter ourselves, wondering if there was an opportunity to sign a petition to keep the statue where it was, as opposed to us who had the petition to move the statue. I informed him I was not aware of such a petition. However, there were some gentlemen to my left, the counter protesters, who I'm sure would probably have that information. But more importantly, I asked him, seeing as we had just come from a prayer, what about his faith and his belief in God would encourage him to want to keep a monument to the glorification of an organization that stood for slavery, that stood for belittling, bludgeoning, beating, demeaning, demoralizing a group of people based entirely upon the color of their skin. And when I asked him that, he told me something very curious. He said to me, well, I don't think God has anything to do with this statue. And that was really intriguing to me. You see, as a Christian, we have a tendency to believe that God can be found in everything. I mean, it's literally in the Bible itself. But more importantly, even in the areas in our life that God doesn't have that great of effect in, i.e. we're not listening to him, one of the things that we pray for is his guidance. I know that I pray for that because, let's face it, those of you who know me know I'm not the greatest Christian on the planet. I'm trying daily, but I'm just not there. So for the individual to tell me that he didn't think that God had anything to do with either keeping a statue to the glorification of evil people or removing a statue to the glorification of evil people was interesting to me. What was particularly interesting was the fact that he was able to that quickly disassociate positive and negative. How he was able to tell me that he didn't feel that we should erase our history, as if I had a time machine that I could go all the way back and change the realities that we experienced. The ability for individuals to compartmentalize wrongdoing to suit their own whatever desire, whether that be twisted and inherently evil or just ignorant and unknown to them, is amazing. It's amazing to me, and it's amazing to most people who are trying to do the right thing, or at least I think it is. So here's the deal. I'm trying to make this as short a video as I possibly can, because I've actually spoken on this previously on a Facebook Live that I was in. And in it I said, and I charged everyone who would listen to be on the right side of history. And now I'm going to broaden that just a little bit. And I'm going to ask people to be on the right side of good and evil. There is an evil in this world. There is an evil that is not relegated to the United States by any means, but one that was somewhat a founding principle of the United States and is still somewhat pervasive. Secretary Pompeo said in a speech just yesterday that he felt that the remnants of slavery played no longer a part in anything that was in and of America, that our original sin, if you will, of our country no longer affected anyone in our country. I won't try to respond to that because on its face it's preposterous. If you disagree, I really just want you to look at some statistics on the different ways that African Americans, Black people experience absolutely everything in America. I mean, social services, healthcare, housing, jobs, anything. But I'm going to pull back. More importantly, I want people to think about original sin for those of you who are Christian. The concept of original sin tells us that all have fallen short of the glory of God, that we are now, because of the original sin of Adam and Eve, we are now no longer blameless as human beings. We of all and will all commit sin. That sin, that original sin, has marked us forever. And we accept that as Christians, that has happened. I don't think that there's too many atheists who would say that even any atheist has ever been a perfect person. It's just, it doesn't make sense. It's quantifiably untrue. But the idea then that we could found a country on a multiplicity of sins, right? We're not just going to say slavery was the original sin of the country. We could say that it was, but it wasn't just slavery of blacks. It was the degradation, subjugation, and eradication, the genocide of the native people. It was, every other ism that still exists to some. I mean, we still have, albeit not so much a pay gap, but a wealth gap even amongst women, although it pales in comparison to the wealth gap in minorities and African Americans in particular. So for us to assume that we can have original sin in a country that was started but some 200 years ago, and we would have totally gotten past that, but Mike Pompeo, who calls himself a Christian, can have the original sin of humanity that still affects us, is a little weird. So I'm going to make this call, and a lot of people are going to probably disagree with me, and that's okay. I'm perfectly content with that, because my mother used to tell me, call a spade, tell the truth, and shame the devil. That's what she used to say to me all the time. She got it from her grandmother, and God knows where my Lucy got it from. But I'm going to call a spade. Here's the deal. I don't believe by any means that these people are just ignorant of the realities that befall minorities, particularly black people in the United States. I don't think that's the case at all. Well, certainly not in the case of Mike Pompeo. He went to West Point, where I'm sure he heard, if not used, the N-word for African Americans, because I don't know of too many of us that went there that didn't hear it from somebody at some point in time. But I digress. The point of it all is the fact that he's not ignorant to the realities. He knows good and daggone well what he's saying and why he's saying it. So what he's doing is he's lying, and that is in and of itself an evil. For those of you who decide to equivocate on these issues that are being brought to the attention and to forefront right now, that equivocation is evil. You are denying the reality of things, and by doing so, you can say that you don't see it, but the truth is that you are removing the ability for people to have what they deserve. Well, what do they deserve, you might ask? So glad you asked that. What they deserve at a minimum, is equality. Now, we can argue that equality without equity is impossible. So while that wealth gap still exists in the United States for Black people who most certainly built this country, but most certainly didn't get anything out of it, except for the scars of whips on their back and a seat at the kiddie table, not even the table. The fact of the matter is that we are still adherent to the negative things that were the founding of our nation. By ignoring them doesn't make them untrue. It just makes certain people feel better about themselves. We deserve equality. We deserve equity. You should be happy that Black people, at least the majority, just want that. They want civility. You should be happy because Black people in general don't want revenge. Because let me tell you, if that were to be what they wanted and what we wanted, this would be a totally different conversation. I put out a video a little while ago about the 5 demands that Black people had given this current state of social unrest. And the vast majority of those had to do with police brutality, which is the issue that we were dealing with at the time. It's the issue we've been dealing with for a long time. It's the issue we're still dealing with. But the truth of the matter remains that that is not the only thing that we deserve. And those 5 demands, although somewhat all-encompassing, don't scratch the surface of what we deserve to be reformed. We deserve reforming in our schools. We deserve reforming in the way we receive healthcare. We deserve reforming in both the objective and subjective way that we experience the legal injustice system in the United States. We deserve so much more. And this is where it gets important. And I want everyone to know this. I'm not going to stop until we get everything we deserve. And I'm going to say, just like, John Lewis's good friend, Dr. King said, I may not get there with you, but I can look over to the mountaintop. I may not get there with you, but don't you think for 5 seconds that that's going to stop me from fighting like I should have been there so many years ago. God bless you, and I love you all.